The most dangerous inmates in Sing Sing Prison, New York. For more than a century, this prison has stood in plain sight. Cars pass it every day. Trains glide by its walls. The river keeps flowing. And yet, what happens inside these walls is something most people never truly understand. Sing Sing is not just a prison. It is a pressure chamber. A place where violence doesn't always explode loudly, but simmers, waits, and calculates. Inside are men who have already crossed lines most people never even approach. Some are infamous. Some are barely known. But all of them are capable of something dangerous. And the most dangerous inmates here aren't always the ones who look threatening. Because in Sing Sing, survival isn't about size or strength. It's about reputation, control, and knowing exactly when to act, and when to stay silent. And what happens next inside these walls is far worse than most people realize. The prison that never sleeps. Sing Sing Correctional Facility sits in Ossining, New York, less than an hour from Manhattan. It was built in 1826, using inmate labor to quarry the very stone that still forms its walls. From the beginning, Sing Sing was designed to intimidate. The original philosophy was silence. Absolute silence. Prisoners were not allowed to speak. Not in the cells. Not at work. Not even during meals. The belief was simple: break the spirit, and the body will follow. That mentality never fully left this place. Over time, reforms came and went. Executions ended. Solitary confinement was rebranded. Rehabilitation programs were introduced. But beneath the surface, Sing Sing remained what it had always been. A place where power decides everything. Today, Sing Sing houses some of New York's most violent offenders. Murderers. Organized crime figures. Career predators. Men serving decades, sometimes life. And when people imagine danger inside prison, they usually imagine chaos. But Sing Sing isn't chaotic. It's organized. And the most dangerous inmates understand that better than anyone else. Who controls the inside? Every prison has a power structure. In Sing Sing, it is unspoken, but rigid. Correction officers control the keys, the counts, and the movement. But inside the housing units, power often shifts to the inmates themselves. Not officially. Never on paper. But everyone knows who runs what. Certain inmates carry influence that goes far beyond their cell. Some control access to contraband. Others decide who gets protected, and who gets targeted. Some can order violence without ever raising their voice. These inmates rarely act impulsively. That's what makes them dangerous. They've learned patience. A man might arrive at Sing Sing thinking strength is enough. He might posture, threaten, try to assert dominance. And then, days or weeks later, he's stabbed in a stairwell. Or jumped in the showers. Or quietly transferred to protective custody without ever explaining why. No warnings. No public confrontations. Just consequences. And the inmates responsible often return to their cells like nothing happened. This is how Sing Sing keeps itself in balance. But to understand who the most dangerous inmates really are, you first have to understand how a normal day inside begins. A day inside Sing Sing. The day starts early. Lights come on before sunrise. A loud count echoes through the tiers. Every inmate must be visible, alive, and accounted for. Missing count is not an option. After count comes movement. Chow hall. Work assignments. Education programs. Maintenance details. To an outsider, it might look routine. Almost calm. But inside that routine, every movement is watched. Who sits where at breakfast? Who walks with who? Who avoids eye contact, and who makes too much of it? In Sing Sing, the smallest behaviors carry meaning. Sitting at the wrong table can be interpreted as a challenge. Walking through the wrong housing unit can be seen as disrespect. Talking to the wrong person can mark you as aligned with someone else's enemies. The most dangerous inmates don't make these mistakes. They move deliberately. They keep their circle small. They speak only when necessary. And most importantly, they remember everything. Because in this environment, memory is a weapon. The men everyone knows about. Over the years, Sing Sing has held some of the most notorious criminals in American history. Men whose names filled newspapers. Men whose crimes shocked the public. Men who were already dangerous long before they ever set foot inside a cell. Some were serial killers. Others were mob enforcers. Some were men who killed once, and some who killed many times. But notoriety doesn't always equal power. In fact, high-profile inmates often become targets. Their reputations follow them inside. Other inmates test them. Some try to provoke them. Others see them as trophies, proof that they can take down someone famous. The truly dangerous inmates understand this dynamic. They don't rely on their past crimes to intimidate. They adapt. And that adaptation is where things begin to turn darker. The ones who don't need a name. Some of the most dangerous men in Sing Sing are not famous at all. They aren't in documentaries. They aren't in history books. They are men serving long sentences for violence who learned quickly how prison really works. These inmates often arrive young, angry, reckless. And then something changes. They watch. They listen. They survive. Over years, sometimes decades, they build a reputation, not through noise, but through consistency. They are the men others come to when there's a dispute. The men whose approval is quietly sought. The men who can stop violence, or unleash it, with a single decision. Correction officers know who they are. Other inmates definitely know who they are. But officially, they are just another number in the system. And that invisibility is exactly what protects them. What happens when one of these men decides someone has crossed a line is something Sing Sing has witnessed again and again. And it never ends the way people expect. Unwritten rules of survival. There are rules inside Sing Sing that are never posted. Don't stare. Don't ask questions that aren't your business. Don't sit where you're not invited. Don't touch what isn't yours. And above all, never involve staff unless your life depends on it. Breaking these rules doesn't always bring immediate punishment. Sometimes, nothing happens for days. That delay is intentional. It creates uncertainty, anxiety, fear. The most dangerous inmates understand psychology. They understand that fear is more powerful when it's delayed. When violence finally happens, it's fast, precise, often over before officers can respond. And afterward, no one talks. Because talking creates a new target. And no one wants to be next. When control fails. Despite all the structure, control sometimes slips. A bad call. A personal grievance. A debt unpaid. When violence breaks out in Sing Sing, it isn't chaotic screaming. It's sudden silence, followed by movement. Inmates scatter. Someone goes down. Others step back as if choreographed. By the time officers arrive, the damage is done. And the men responsible often blend back into the population, their faces calm, their expressions unreadable. They know the cameras. They know the response times. They know exactly how far they can go. That knowledge doesn't come from instinct. It comes from experience. And the inmates with the most experience are the ones everyone fears the most. The cost of being dangerous. Being dangerous in Sing Sing comes at a price. Increased scrutiny. More searches. Transfers to higher security housing. Sometimes isolation. But for some inmates, that price is worth paying. Because control is currency. Control means safety. Control means influence. Control means survival. And for men serving life sentences, survival isn't about getting out. It's about controlling how they live, and how others treat them, inside. What many people don't realize is that some of the most dangerous inmates eventually reach a point where violence becomes unnecessary. Their reputation does the work for them. And that's when they become truly untouchable. The story of danger inside Sing Sing doesn't end with individual inmates. It extends into alliances, racial divisions, long-standing grudges, and power struggles that span decades. Some conflicts begin on the street and continue inside the walls. Others are born here, and never leave. And the most dangerous moments are often the ones no one sees coming. Because the men who cause them don't announce themselves. They wait. The yard, where power becomes visible. The yard is where Sing Sing reveals itself. Inside the cell blocks, danger hides behind walls and routines. Out here, it becomes visible. The yard looks open, but it is anything but free. Every group has its space. Every bench, every patch of concrete, every stretch of fence already belongs to someone. These boundaries are not marked, but crossing them can be enough to trigger violence. New inmates learn quickly by watching. Who walks alone and is left alone? Who is always surrounded? Who never raises his voice, yet no one interrupts him? The most dangerous inmates rarely stand out. They don't pace like predators. They don't posture. They sit. They observe. And when they do move, others make room without being asked. This is not fear driven by chaos. It is fear driven by certainty. Everyone knows what these men are capable of, not because they talk about it, but because someone else already paid the price. Alliance and survival. Like most maximum security prisons in America, Sing Sing is shaped by racial and ethnic divisions. These divisions are not officially enforced, but they are real. Inmates often align along racial lines for protection. These alliances dictate where you sit, who you associate with, and who will back you if conflict erupts. The most dangerous inmates understand these dynamics deeply. Some rise within their own groups. Others become intermediaries, men who can move between factions, negotiate truces, or quietly escalate conflicts when it benefits them. This kind of influence is far more powerful than physical strength. Because when violence comes, it rarely involves just one person. It spreads. And the men who know how to control that spread, how to direct it, slow it, or unleash it, are the ones everyone watches. But the yard is only one side of the story. The real danger often lives indoors. Inside the housing units. Housing units are pressure cookers. Dozens of men confined together for years. Limited privacy. Constant noise. Old grudges. New tensions. Here, respect is everything. Disrespect doesn't always look dramatic. It can be subtle. Taking someone's phone time. Cutting in line. Speaking to someone else's associate without permission. The most dangerous inmates never react immediately. They let things sit. They watch how others respond. Who notices? Who doesn't? Retaliation, when it comes, is rarely impulsive. It's calculated. And often, it happens in places with no witnesses, stairwells, bathrooms, laundry rooms. By the time officers arrive, the hierarchy has already been reinforced. The message has already been delivered. When reputation becomes armor. Reputation is everything in Sing Sing. A man who is known to retaliate doesn't need to threaten anyone. His past actions speak for him. Some of the most dangerous inmates reached this point years ago. They may now appear calm, almost withdrawn. But their history lives on in stories passed quietly from one inmate to another. That history protects them. It allows them to move freely. To speak without being challenged. To refuse requests without consequence. And when someone ignores that reputation, when a younger inmate decides to test it, the response is swift. Because reputation, once damaged, must be restored. No exceptions. The role of correction officers. Correction officers at Sing Correctional Facility walk a fine line. They enforce rules. They maintain order. But they also understand the informal power structures inside. Experienced officers know which inmates carry influence. They know who to watch closely, and who rarely causes problems, even if their reputation says otherwise. Sometimes, officers intervene early to prevent violence. Other times, they arrive after the fact. The truth is uncomfortable. Total control inside a prison like Sing Sing is impossible. Order is often maintained through a fragile balance between official authority and inmate hierarchy. And the most dangerous inmates know exactly how to operate within that balance, pushing just far enough without crossing lines that bring severe consequences. Discipline and isolation. When inmates cross certain lines, punishment follows. Loss of privileges. Restricted movement. Isolation. Solitary confinement is one of the harshest tools available. Days or weeks spent alone with minimal human contact. For some inmates, isolation breaks them. For others, especially the most dangerous ones, it barely registers. Some have spent years in similar conditions. Some use the time to think, plan, and reset. Isolation doesn't always reduce danger. Sometimes, it concentrates it. When these men return to the general population, they often come back quieter, sharper, and more focused. Which makes them even more dangerous than before. The young and the old. Sing Sing holds men at every stage of their sentence. Some are in their 20s, still reacting emotionally. Others are decades in, hardened by time. The most dangerous inmates are often those who survived both phases. They remember what it was like to be reckless, and they learned why that recklessness doesn't last. Younger inmates sometimes mistake calm for weakness. They learn quickly how wrong that assumption can be. Because the men who last the longest are the ones who learned patience. And patience, inside Sing Sing, is a lethal skill. The moment everything changes. Violence in Sing Sing rarely announces itself. There's no warning siren. No dramatic build-up. It happens in ordinary moments. A walk to the shower. A trip to the phone. A quiet conversation that ends too abruptly. One moment everything is normal. The next, someone is bleeding on the floor. And the men responsible disappear back into the routine. This suddenness is what keeps everyone on edge. Because if it can happen to one person, it can happen to anyone. And that uncertainty is its own form of control. The psychological toll. Living among dangerous men changes people. Sleep becomes lighter. Trust disappears. Every interaction is measured. Some inmates withdraw completely. Others harden. The most dangerous inmates adapt in ways that allow them to function, emotionally detached, hyper-aware, controlled. This isn't bravery. It's survival. And it comes at a cost that often isn't visible until years later. Why Sing Sing endures? Sing Sing has endured because it reflects something uncomfortable about incarceration. You can build walls. You can enforce rules. You can impose sentences measured in decades. But you cannot erase human behavior. Inside these walls, power will always exist. Hierarchies will always form. And danger will always adapt. The most dangerous inmates are not monsters from another world. They are men who learned how this one works, better than anyone else around them. What still lies ahead? The story of Sing Sing is not finished. New inmates arrive. Old ones age. Power shifts quietly from one generation to the next. Some men leave. Others never will. And the most dangerous inmates rarely disappear, they simply become legends inside the walls. In the next part of this story, we look deeper at how violence inside Sing Sing echoes beyond the prison, and what happens when men shaped by this environment finally face life outside, or realize they never will. Because what Sing Sing creates doesn't always stay contained. And sometimes, the most dangerous part comes after the gates open. Sing Sing doesn't end when the lights go out. The walls remain. The routines continue. And the men inside wake up tomorrow under the same pressure that shaped them today. Some will survive by staying invisible. Some by becoming feared. And some will never escape the weight of what this place has turned them into. Because long after the gates close, Sing Sing keeps working, quietly, relentlessly, on everyone who passes through it. And not all of them leave the same way they entered.